Hey, what's up to everybody out there? Welcome to another edition of the Roundtable Talk, and I'm your host, C Money. And before we get started in this episode, I would just like to apologize for the last episode. I was at Athlete Range Park, and it started raining, so I had to cut the episode short. Throughout this month, I'm going to be doing that Black History Month. I may be at a historical park or a park that is named after African American personnel or anything of that nature, or maybe talking about African American history or anything of that matter, which is what the topic we're going to be talking about today. So I do apologize for that, and stuff like that. So let's get down to it. I want to talk about a controversy, if you're in the state of Florida, that's going on right now. Governor Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of the state of Florida, has rejected the right to teach APA, African American Studies, in classrooms, and now they have brought up some big controversy. They even protested. I've seen it in the news. Just yesterday, obviously, I was watching the news, and they was protesting in the state's capital, which is Tallahassee, and they had brought on Reverend Al Sharpton, and a lot of political figures was protesting, and a lot of people was protesting that why is it that you're denying the studies and the teachings of African American history in these schools. Here's my thing about this, and I'm gonna say this too. Black History Month is in the month of February, and there's always been controversy about that, where a lot of people are saying, why they did Black History Month in the shortest month of the year. And it's not because of that. It's because they wanted to center it around Frederick Douglass's birthday, which is in the month of February. But not only that, African American history, or Black history, should be celebrated all year long. McDonald's did that thing and they still doing it, where Black history is celebrated 365 days a year, which is true. And my thing is, Black history shouldn't just be celebrated in the month. It should be celebrated all year. Because when you're in elementary and middle school and high school, throughout the month of February, they only talk about Black history throughout the month of February. But my thing is, there should be a course, not just for Black history, for all history, for Jewish heritage, Hispanic heritage, Chinese heritage, Japanese heritage, Black heritage. There should be a course for all of this to be, because I know about my forefathers. I know about, African American history because I'm African American. But there is things that you don't know about African American history that everybody should know. During the month of February, you already know, they only talk about the main people. Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Jesse Jackson, Frederick Douglass, Madam C.J. Walker. They only talk about, the main people. Harriet Tubman and, Thurgood Marshall and all these people. What about Crispus Attucks, Gary A. Morris, you don't know the people who fought in the wars, the people who sat down in these seats at these for whites only restaurants, people who tried to change history. It wasn't just Dr. Martin Luther King that tried to change history. It was people, our forefathers, people from our past. Every family has somebody who tried to change history in African American families, and they don't teach that. They only teach you in the month of February. Dr. Martin Luther King marched for everybody. Rosa Parks gave up her seat on the bus, and it changed. Started the Montgomery bus boycott. Jesse Jackson, and Malcolm X, and this, and they only tell you about the main people. They don't tell you about the people behind the people. Martin Luther King's mentor or inspiration came from Mahatma Gandhi. Even though he wasn't really African American, but his teachings and his sayings, was inspired from Mahatma Gandhi. And it's not even that, it's the fact that we don't celebrate heritage of all cultures like we supposed to. Yeah, you have Hispanic heritage bunch, and then you have Jewish heritage, and then you have, Black history. But it's not celebrating. And now the fact that you're denying the studies and the teachings of this in the classrooms, it's like you're denying people of their histories. I was watching the news yesterday when they was talking about it, and it was a Caucasian teenage girl or a Caucasian girl, and when she was like, yeah, I wouldn't mind, being taught that because it's something that needs to be taught and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, there are people out there that would love to be taught the history that is not of their own. Yeah, you want to be taught the African American history. I feel, I wouldn't mind being taught history about our Cuban and about Cuban ancestries and Jewish ancestries. All I know about Jewish people, it was the Holocaust and how Hitler invaded them and tried to kill all the Jews. That's the only thing I know about it. I don't know the history behind Jews and behind Chinese and Japanese and Cubans and all this. I don't know the history behind it, but it would be nice to know and to be taught that, and to know the history behind other minorities and to other cultures, because they always try to say, oh, African American history, African. Yeah, we probably had it between us and the Jews. Us and the Jews probably had it the worst, because the Jews, they was the Holocaust and everything, and then you had the African Americans where they were slaves and all that. So we had it bad, but I want to know more about all cultures, because African American history should be taught year round. And yeah, you could probably go to college and say, oh, I want to major in African American studies and all that, but that's just something. But what about the people who don't major in it, but still, you will have people that would love to know about the history. I would want to know the history behind, our forefathers, the history behind, who was a civil rights leader before Martin Luther King. There had to be somebody out there that was trying to fight for us to get our rights before Martin Luther King came about. Because Martin Luther King wasn't probably the first African American civil rights activist. There was probably many activists in the 1800s or in the early 1900s. Martin Luther King was born in 1929, So before then, there had to be somebody who was out there trying to fight for us, or there had to be somebody who was trying to fight for our rights or do something for us. We wasn't just out here doing this, and it wasn't just Martin Luther King or Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or Malcolm X and stuff. There had to be somebody before us, and we don't know that history because they don't teach us that history. They only teach us about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and the Million Man March and the March on Washington and Rosa Parks, and there had to be another Rosa Parks before us that didn't give up her seat and had to go to jail, and it sparked some controversy. There had to be, a lot of things that happened before Martin Luther King, did his "I Had a Dream" speech, and stuff like that. The Hampton House, which is a historical house here in South Florida. Unfortunately, I've been there for a private event, but unfortunately, I can't actually go and take a tour of it because it's like a, historical place that, you can't go in, but it was where they say Martin Luther King, it was like a motel for African American colored people, where, and they say it was the place where he was, getting his speech, "I Have a Dream" speech up, and he was, doing the writings and all that stuff for his "I Have a Dream" speech, and it was the place where he was getting his ideas and thoughts and all that stuff. Just like Virginia Key Beach, remember I did a video, several videos of Virginia Key Beach where that was the only African American, park that African Americans down here in South Florida can go to, and back then it was only accessible by boat because they didn't really have a causeway or bridge that with to access, you have to access it by boat. A lot of these places, there have been forefathers way before the main forefathers that we know about and the main civil rights people that we know about, to know that there had to be somebody out there. And for us to deny that right to learn and study and know about our history, it's like telling me that it's trash. That's why I seen it on the news today. It was doing the protests and everything, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show, because I'm like, yeah, you're denying our young people the knowledge of their history. There are people right now that are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, people that are younger than us, people that are 12 and 13 and 14 years old that are in these schools. And a lot of these kids, you can probably, if you tell them about what do you know about black history, and they'll probably say, oh, I know Martin Luther King, and I know, Rosa Parks, and I know Harriet Tubman led the, and I know, but if you ask them what you know deeper into African American history, they probably won't tell you, oh, they know about Sojourner Truth or Crispus Attucks or a lot of these people that fought in the Revolutionary War and fought in the wars before us, and they won't tell you these men that came before Martin Luther King and Jesse Jackson and all them, and fought. They're probably only going to tell you, oh, I know about Martin Luther King, he was our civil rights leader. But there was also civil rights leaders before Martin Luther King, and I mean, I don't know too many of them, but this is something that not only as a child but as an adult that people should know about. There are a lot of adults, including myself, that don't know nothing about a lot of African American history because it's not taught in these schools. And then as we go up, we don't think to do research on, okay, here's our ancestries on African American history. A lot of these people, they go around and say, yeah, I want to know about my family history, but I don't know about my African American history. Every one of us African Americans have a descendant from Africa. We didn't just was here. One of our ancestors had to come from Africa as a slave member, and we was brought here to be a slave, and then as slavery ended, we migrated to different areas and we builded empires, meaning families and families and families and families. If you, do like the Ancestry website where you can learn about your family, or if you go like this TV show called, I forgot the name of the TV show, From Your Roots or Naming Your Roots or something like that. But it's like our ancestries, we don't know about our history. Everybody that, every African American family has a person who tried to change the world. They probably didn't change it as much as Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks did or Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton, but they changed it differently. Maybe they sat in a seat and got arrested and that sparked the issue with somebody, or maybe they did at Rosa Parks where they sat on the bus and then it sparked the issue, or maybe they tried to chain themselves to something and do something about something and it maybe sparked the whole controversy. We don't know. But to deny our community and our kids and our young people, and when I say young people, I don't just mean children and teenagers, I mean young adults as well too, and adults as well too, to our young people, because I know there are people that are 80s and 70s and stuff that are older that say, yes, I know this history, but the people under 50 don't know this history. The people under 40 or the people in their 30s and 20s don't know the history of African American history. You just know about Martin Luther King and how he marched on Washington and how he helped with the Montgomery bus boycott and how Rosa Parks sparked the Montgomery bus boycott and how Jesse Jackson was this and how Jesse Jackson was that. When I visited the African American, the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta, I told you this. I didn't visit it when I did my episode in Atlanta. I visited in 2019 when I did go to Atlanta. The first time I went to Atlanta, and when they had the pictures of when Martin Luther King was on the balcony of the hotel, and they had a lot of things, and it gave me, and it showed, and it was a lot of history in that museum, and it taught you more than what you just wanted to know. It taught you more than what you already know about. It gave you more insights of more African American history, and I felt like because of that I needed to know more about my history. And now you're depriving young people of that. Nobody just want to learn African American history in the month of February. We want to learn African American history every day. Look at what's going down. Not too many kids will know that people used to get sprayed with water hoses and used to get chased after with dogs, and you can how it was wrong for you to go inside of this place, and then you know, when you had to go through the back entrance, like they call it the colored entrance, you know. And a lot of these people don't know these facts, and then these kids doing these things now today, and they don't realize there are people out there that fought for you to sit anywhere you want to sit on the bus. There are people that fought for you that you can go up to a restaurant and sit at the front counter without having to be criticized. There are people out there that fought for you where you can go through the front entrance of a store rather than have to go through the back entrance, which is the colored entrance. There is people that fought for you, Brown versus the Board of Education, you know, and stuff like that, you know, where, you know, you can go to the same school as a Latino, as a Caucasian, as a Chinese, you know, you can go to school with a diverse education. You know, they didn't have segregated schools. They didn't have segregated restaurants. They didn't have segregated parks where, you know, you had to only go to the Virginia Keep, you know, beach park, or you can only go to this restaurant, or you can only stay at the Hampton House, or you can only watch movies and watch shows at the Lyric Theater, or you can't go here, or you can't go there. So you need to know that there was more to it than just Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. There was more to it than just Jesse Jackson and Coretta Scott King. There was more to it than just, you know, Malcolm X and, you know, Harriet Tubman. There's more people. There's people now that is making history. Thurgood Marshall, the first African American Supreme Court justice person. You know, the first judge, the first African American judge to be on the Supreme Court justice. You know, you have a lot of this history about people that we don't know about, and then you're not giving, you're saying you're denying this. You know, you're denying people to know the history of their forefathers. You're denying people they know the history of the people who paved the way for them. You know, the people who paved the way for us to do things that we can do now. You know, we could walk outside of our house without being called a nigger, or without being spit on, without being sprayed with water, without being chased by a dog, without saying, boy, you can't sit there, boy. Boy, you got to sit in the back of the bus. I can get on the bus right now, pay my bus fare, and I have the right to either sit in the front of the bus, the middle of the bus, or the back of the bus. I have a right to go inside the restaurant to say I can sit at this counter without having to be worried about somebody saying I can't sit here. Or I can say I can walk through this grocery store without having to go through the colored entrance. Or I can go sit in this park and sit next to a white person in this park and read a book, or play on my phone, or play in the or sit by the water without having to worry about somebody saying, boy, you can't do. You know, it's your private of our history to know that there are people out there that fought for us to in this history, and now you're denying us the studies of our history. You know, and you know that's why they're protesting that. And he tried to make it seem like, oh, there is a part of the study that says queer theory. You know, why, you know, what is the thing about queer theory, or queer theory studies and all that. But it's not the fact that, you know, you have to realize one thing about this. This is a study of African American history. You're saying that some of this stuff that they have should not be taught. Just like, remember, I did a show a while back, a couple of episodes ago, about they had a controversy about teaching sex education in public schools and stuff like that. I feel basically that you're denying people the right to teach people about history. Just like, and it's not just African American history. Like I said, it's Hispanic heritage, Jewish heritage. You know, that's because by you denying them to teach African American histories, that means you're denying all histories to be taught into schools. You know, not just African American history, but Hispanic heritage, Jewish heritage. You know, you're denying. That's like saying you're denying all minority heritage to be taught into schools. You know, African American history is just the forefather of the topic, to where you're actually denying this history to be taught in schools. And I'm like, why? if I want to know more about history, I shouldn't have to go. I shouldn't have to go to a library to learn about history. There should, just like History Miami is a museum that's here in South Florida, which I'll probably be doing an episode in the near future, where it talks about the history of Miami, and it's not just about, and it's all history of Miami. It's history, African American history, Jewish, whatever history that's in Miami. It's all about the history, and I look at it as if you don't actually think that our history, you don't think that our history should be taught. And you know, I want to know what y'all think about this, because this is like something that's saying, I don't want you to learn about this because I think it's not good for you. Or like saying with the sex education, I don't want you to learn about sex because I feel like with that, sex need to be taught at an earlier age. Not the whole sex where you know, the sexual, you know, get it on. But I honestly feel that we need to know about what went down in history, you know, with our ancestors. You know, we all know that all Africans came from Africa, you know, and that our ancestries came over here from Africa by slavery. But I don't know none of my ancestors that were slave. You know, yeah, you got to go and pay this money and go to a person to do where they have to dig in your roots and, you know, doing all this stuff. You know, Knowing Your Roots is a TV show that comes on PBS that has where they have celebrities that come on and they you know, get to know about their roots and about their past, and you know, some of them find out that they're descendants from white people and stuff like that. You know, they're like, with mine, I've seen that there are Caucasian people with my last name, and I'm like, yeah, I need to know more about my roots. But for you to deny any other history, you know, yeah, I could probably have somebody in my family who was a civil rights person now. Like I say, everybody in there in the African American community, every African American family has somebody who either fought in some type of war, or who was there at the March on Washington, or who was there when Dr. Martin Luther King had his I Have a Dream speech. There was somebody in your family that, you know, can tell you the history of your ancestors. But you need to know more into other history as well. You know, we know about Martin Luther King. Like I said, we know about Rosa Parks. We know about Jesse Jackson and Malcolm X, and you know, Reverend Al Sharpton and all of these places. You know, but there are activists that we don't know. You know, Angela Davis. You know, Marian Anderson, the first person to sing at the White House. You know, Madam C.J. Walker, the first millionaire, you know, female, African American female millionaire. You know, Crispus Attucks. You know, a lot of these places that people don't know. A lot of these people in these places don't know. Just like when I did, remember I did an episode a while back, Hotspots in South Florida, where we was at Bill Beck's Cape Florida State Park, and that was in the state park is where a lot of the a lot of African Americans had fled and was fled into Bill Beck's State Park to get on boats to flee away from slavery. And you know, that's history that you don't know. I would have never known that if I wouldn't have visited the park. And the same thing about Virginia Key Beach. I only knew about Virginia Key Beach as it was the park where black people can go to back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where, you know, that was the only park that black people can go to. You know, and now, you know, you don't know this history, that this history lives into our lives, and we have to know that there's more to that history than everything. Just like the Hampton House. The Hampton House, when I did visit it, they had pictures of Martin Luther King there and everything, and they had a picture of him playing. You know, he was swimming in the pool there, and they say that was the place where he was gathering up and getting his thoughts and speeches together for his I Have a Dream speech. You know, you don't know these things until you know these things, and it's like the history you have to know about. You know, and to know that this history cannot be taught in these schools is very like troublesome, because now you're saying that you're denying the history of our ancestors to not be taught to our young people. Because now when you go into these schools and when you go into these classrooms, what's the thing that they mainly teach you about? They teach you about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, the Montgomery bus boycott, the March on Washington, and the I Have a Dream speech. And sometimes Harriet Tubman because she freed the slaves and about slavery. But you don't know nobody else that's behind it. You have people that was behind Martin Luther King. You know, who was with Martin Luther King when he did the speech? You know, he had to have people behind him. You know, he had to have people, you know, that's when I visited Atlanta in 2019, you know, I visited the Ebenezer Baptist Church. I've also visited the King Center, you know, that Coretta Scott had helped develop. I visited their gravesite. You saw that I visited the gravesite in my episode that I did last year when I visited Atlanta. But when I did my 2019, I actually visited more than what, you know, you saw in the previous episode when I visited Atlanta. Because when I did Atlanta visit, I only, you know, did the gravesite of Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott. I visited the house, but I didn't visit the inside. And in 2019, I didn't visit the inside either because you have to get up early in the morning to visit. I visited the Ebenezer Church, but I visited on the inside of the church, and I did have videos of the inside of the church. I visited one of the King Center, and I visited the Visitor Center, I believe, where they have, you know, pictures and things, and they had like a remake of like some of the things, like a reincarnation of some of the, you know, things and stuff like that. So it's like you don't learn the history, and a lot of these kids, young people, need to learn. There need to be African American studies in every state, and not just African American studies, Cuban studies, you know, because, you know, a lot of these history, and I know a lot of y'all might be saying, we don't need to know about the history of Hispanic heritage, we don't need to know about Jewish heritage, we don't need to know. But why do you think other people need to know about our heritage and we don't need to know about their heritage? And that's the thing that gets me. We don't need to know about African American heritage, but every day we hear about this person, that person, that person, but nobody gets to hear about our heritage. You know, the first Cuban singer, the first Hispanic person, the first Japanese person, but we don't get to hear about the first African American person only through Black History Month. And everybody thinks that, oh, our first civil rights activist was Martin Luther King. No, Martin Luther King was just the main civil rights activist. But there were civil rights activists before Martin Luther King. They just are never taught because he was the main one. So that's what I feel that should be said, that we need to know more about it. What do you feel about this? Do you think that we need to have these studies taught in schools? And I know they're being taught in colleges because I know you can, you know, pick your courses and stuff, but do you think they need to be taught in regular school? What do you think that this is? You know, email me, roundtable00@yahoo.com. Don't forget to comment at the bottom of this page, because this is a very interesting topic that I was saying, and I say this is something that needs to be taught, because as human beings, we need to know about all types of history, and we need to know that there was more in history than to what we are taught in school now. There's more to Martin Luther King. There's more to Rosa Parks. There's more to Jesse Jackson. There's more to Malcolm X. There's more to a lot of these people that you don't know about. And there's people out there that we don't know about that is not being taught in our classrooms that should be known. You know, Martin Luther King is not the first activist out there. There's been many activists before Martin Luther King. You know, you have Angela Davis. You know, you have a lot of these activists. You had some activists that are not even known. You know, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air did an episode about, you know, when Uncle Phil and Aunt Vi, you know, or Vivian, I should say, where they did an episode where one of their friends, and they used to protest and stuff, at certain rallies and stuff like that. But then, you know, they grew up and all that stuff. So it was like, you don't know. There's people out there behind the scenes, even though that was just acting, and that was just a sitcom, but it is mainly, to me, is based on a true story where, you know, you have these people out here that are unknown civil rights activists that came out there. Some was there when Martin Luther King was there. Some was before Martin Luther King. Some are after Martin Luther King. And there are civil rights activists that we don't know about. And there are people who have been changing lives in the history of, African American history that we don't know about. But we are too blind to know about it because we are not being taught this in schools. We are not being taught this in classrooms, and this is something that should be taught. What do you think about this? Do you think it needs to be taught in schools? Do you think that it needs to be, taught all year round? Do you think that is bad for what the governor Ron DeSantis did, or do you think that is a good thing that he rejected, or you think this is a bad thing? Email me, roundtable00@yahoo.com. Don't forget to comment at the bottom of this page. I am your host, C Money. Thank you for watching this show. Don't forget to click and subscribe to this. Don't forget to click and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to check out our previous episodes. And don't forget to check us out in our next few episodes. And don't forget to keep on lookout for us. Stay blessed, stay safe, and I will see you in the next episode. Have a blessed day.